Hi there, everyone, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, a podcast about gardening, botanical history, and literature. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and today is September 17th. Today we celebrate a Swedish botanist and professor, a Scottish minister and naturalist, and a British botanist. We'll hear an excerpt about September's changing colors, and we grow that garden library today with a book about the language of plants, what they are saying to us if we only know how to listen. And then we'll wrap things up with an American writer and her description of the end of summer. But first, here's today's curated news. Today's curated news was written by John Wire from the website Bowles and Wire, and this is part of a series of blogs that John wrote. They explore the A to Z of garden design and horticulture. It's a really nice collection of articles. And so today's article is called E is for Evergreen. And I love how John starts this out. He shares a typical conversation that he has frequently with his clients. The client says, "We want everything evergreen." And then he writes his response, "Sigh. Part of the enjoyment in gardens is seasonality. What has changed since you were last in the garden? Autumn color, spring blossoms, bright winter stems." And then the client says, "We want year-round color as well." And then he answers, "Would you like chocolate sprinkles, nuts, and sauce with that?" And the client says, "Yes, please, and a flake." Well, of course, John is being a little tongue-in-cheek here. Of course, he loves evergreens, but as a garden designer, he really appreciates the full palette of plants, the wide range of material that's available to even home gardeners nowadays. But in this article that John writes about evergreens, he talks a little bit about the history of this group of plants, some of the standout plants that are evergreen, like holly and yew trees, and then he talks about some of his personal favorites to use in the garden. It's a fun little article. If you really like this piece by John, I'd encourage you to bookmark his blog so that you can read all of the pieces that he's writing in his A to Z series. And of course, I make it really easy for you to track down this website, this particular article by John, because I share it in the Facebook group for the show. All you need to do is head on over to Daily Gardener Community when you're over in Facebook, and then request to join if you're not already a member. And if you are a member, once you're there, just look for the little magnifying glass at the top of the page, and that's where you can search for the word evergreen, and then John's post will pop right up. Now, there is one other thing that I wanted to share with you today, and that is a sweet little book of poetry that my daughter got me for my birthday back in June. And this has been sitting on my desk ever since because I wanted to share it with you. It's called How to Love the World, Poems of Gratitude and Hope, and it was edited by James Cruz. Well, this sweet little book has adorable botanical art on the cover. Now, one of my favorite poems in this book is by Nancy Miller Gomez. Her poem is on page 58. It's called Growing Apples, and it starts out this way. "There is big excitement in C Block today. On the windowsill, in a plastic ice cream cup, a little plant is growing. This is all the men want to talk about, how an apple seed germinated in a crack of damp concrete." And then she goes on to tell this story in this sweet little poem. But again, you can find this adorable little book of poetry. It's from Story Publishing, and you can get it very easily over at Target. This was a birthday present. It's called How to Love the World, Poems of Gratitude and Hope. Sweet little book. All right, it's time for today's botanical history. Here's botanical history for today, September 17th. Olaus Rudbeck died on this day back in 1702. He was a Swedish botanist, and 4 months before he died, a fire destroyed much of his hometown of Uppsala. And at 72 years old, he helped lead the effort to save the building where he taught at the university, even after learning that the fire had destroyed his own home, along with his personal collections and writings. But thanks to Olaus, the university library was saved, and in quick fashion, after the fire, Olaus drew up plans to rebuild his city. The plans were carried out without him. 29 years after his death, Carl Linnaeus named the Rudbeckia, or Black-Eyed Susan, after him. Linnaeus wrote, "So long as the earth shall survive, and as each spring shall see it covered with flowers, the Rudbeckia will preserve your glorious name." And it was on this day, in 1833, that the Scottish minister and naturalist Hugh Macmillan was born. In his book, The Ministry of Nature, which was published in 1871, he wrote, "Nature looks dead in winter because her life is gathered into her heart. She withers the plant down to the root so that she may grow it up again, fairer and stronger. She calls her family together within her inmost home to prepare them for being scattered abroad upon the face of the earth." And today is the birthday of Patrick Millington Synge. He was a British botanist, writer, and plant hunter, and he was born on this day in 1910. He served as chief editor for the Royal Horticultural Society. In 1934, he joined the British Museum's expedition to the Ruwenzori. It's a mountain range that covers Kenya and Uganda, and it inspired his book, The Mountains of the Moon, which was a nod to Herodotus's name for the area. This equatorial mountain range features lakes that were home to 6-foot-tall impatiens, 30-foot-tall lobelia, and thick tree-like heather. The experience was otherworldly, and Patrick's writing is romantic and lyrical. For instance, he wrote, "Slowly we glide out through a long lane of water and cut through the papyrus thicket into Lake Kyoga, where blue water lilies cover the surface with a far-stretching shimmer of blue and green." Vita Sackville West loved Patrick's book. In one of her columns, where she was writing about groundsel, she wrote, "Readers of Mr. Patrick Synge's enthralling book will remember his photographs of this alarming plant." Well, today, Patrick is remembered in the daffodil that bears his name, and in the stunning exotic flower, Abutilon Patrick Synge. It's time for today's Unearthed Words. Today's Unearthed Words come to us from Kate Morton from her best-selling 2010 fiction book called The Forgotten Garden. Here's an excerpt. "And finally it seemed autumn had realized it was September. The last lingering days of summer had been pushed off stage, and in the hidden garden, long shadows stretched toward winter. The ground was littered with spent leaves, orange and pale green, and chestnuts on spiky coats sat proudly on the fingertips of cold branches." It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Thus Spoke the Plant by Monica Gagliano. This book came out in 2018, and the subtitle is A Remarkable Journey of Groundbreaking Scientific Discoveries and Personal Encounters with Plants. In this book, research scientist Monica Gagliano explores plant communication, a fascinating subject that influenced her academic research and ultimately changed her life. Monica has studied plant communication and cognition for a good amount of her academic career, and in this book, she shares firsthand accounts relating to plant communication from people all over the world, and then she also shares recent scientific revelations. This book is 176 pages of plant stories, strange, beautiful, and unforgettable. You can get a copy of Thus Spoke the Plant by Monica Gagliano and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $20. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. Today is the birthday of Elizabeth Enright, the American writer, illustrator, and creative writing teacher who was born on this day, September 17th, in 1907. Elizabeth won the Newbery Medal for her book Thimble Summer, which she wrote back in 1938. And in 1944, in Book 3 of her popular Melindy family series called Then There Were Five, she wrote, "The mullein had finished blooming and stood up out of the pastures like dusty candelabra. The flowers of Queen Anne's lace had curled up into birds' nests, and the bee balm was covered with little crown-shaped pods. In another month, no, 2 maybe, would come the season of the skeletons, when all that was left of the weeds was their brittle architecture. But the time was not yet. The air was warm and bright. The grass was green, and the leaves and the lazy monarch butterflies were everywhere." Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Maple Grove and Wyoming, Minnesota. If you want to read today's show notes, just head on over to thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. And don't forget that you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. Last but not least, you can always get in touch by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you on Monday.